Hey, how you doing? This is Pastor Brian Anderson, and we have another video centered on the book of Titus. As you know, we're working our way through the book together. Hopefully, by doing it this way, you're getting some ideas of how you can study the Bible on your own. That's really my desire, is to equip you to do that. And we've been in Titus chapter 1, verses 10 to 16. We've gone through the observation stage, where we got out our pen and our highlighters, and we just observed as much as we could from the text. And then we went into the interpretation stage. There were a couple of issues from this passage that we needed to interpret because the meaning was not readily apparent. So we did that. And now we've come to the final stage, which is application. How do we actually apply what we've been reading to our life? And we'll take verses 10 to 16, and I'll just bring out a couple of applications for you to consider. One might be this: the leaders of any local church are responsible to maintain the purity of doctrine in that local church. And if someone begins to teach false doctrine within that local church, the leaders, the elders, the pastors are responsible to silence them. That comes right out for us in verses 11 and 13. In verse 11, Paul, writing to Timothy, says that these false teachers must be silenced because they are upsetting whole families. And in verse 13, he tells Titus to reprove them severely so that they may be sound in the faith. Now, of course, we have to be discerning and wise about this because some false doctrine is much more damaging than other false doctrine. For example, someone might have a different position on the end times, the last days, than you do. Maybe you're premillennial and they're postmillennial or amillennial. Someone might have a different view of church government than you do, or whether the supernatural gifts of the Holy Spirit are still valid for the church today or not. Those doctrines are they're not salvation issues. They're not damning doctrines. They're important doctrines, and each church needs to work through them and come to a settled conviction about them, but they're of a different class than someone who is teaching, in his teaching, he's denying the humanity of Christ or the deity, the godhood of Christ. Or perhaps he's denying the sinlessness of Christ or the substitutionary atonement of the cross or the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead or his second coming. Maybe they're asserting that salvation is the result of our good works, or that you have to be water baptized in order to be saved, or that you have to speak in tongues in order to be saved. All of those issues are salvation issues, and they are much more serious. And so the leaders of any local church really have to pay very close attention to someone who's crossing the line and teaching something contrary to good, wholesome, sound doctrine. So if you're a leader in a local church, you are responsible to maintain the purity of doctrine within that church. Are you a pastor? Are you a leader? Are you an elder in your local church? Are you being faithful? It takes courage, doesn't it? It takes boldness and courage in order to silence those that are teaching damning doctrines, but it is something that as leaders we must do. So that would be the first point of application. Another one would be this. As we work our way down to verse 16, it says, "These false teachers profess to know God, but by their deeds they deny him, being detestable and disobedient and worthless for any good deed." So there are many people who profess to believe in and love God, but by their deeds, they actually deny God. I've talked to many, I would say dozens, probably hundreds of people. I'm sure it's been hundreds by this time, who say, "Oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. I'm a Christian." But when you get to know them, get to know their life, you find out that they're living with their girlfriend or their boyfriend, or they're abusing drugs or alcohol, or they're using profanity all of the time, or I don't know, the list just goes on and on. But you get my drift. They're not living a life consistent with the profession that they have made. You can actually profess to know God and deny God by the kind of life that you live. That's another point of application. So we need to ask ourselves, does my life line up with my profession of faith in Jesus Christ? Is there consistency between the way I live and what I say? Anybody can say anything. What's important is that the fruit of our lips is consistent with the fruit of our lives. Are you living a godly life? Are you seeking holiness? Are you repenting of sin and making strides towards Christ's likeness? So, how are you doing in that regard? And this would apply to any Christian, not just leaders of a local church. How are you doing? Does your life match your lips? So those are a couple of applications we can make from this section. Next time, we're going to get into chapter 2 and start a brand new section together with our observations. So may God richly bless you.